forget.
No, not at all. No, it's all cultural.
Didn't want to cross any lines, I shouldn't be crossing.
No, not a problem.
Thank you.
Full democracy here.
Sweet. Mostly anyway.
Yeah, well, not over there.
Yeah, so, I was going to ask how things were going.
Hi, Ellen. Yeah, I just ended the recording.
Yeah.
It's a magnet car from the background.
Ready?
Mr. Batten, good morning.
Hello there.
It's good to see you here.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
Lovely to be in the English countryside on such a beautiful day.
Absolutely. Can you tell us why you are here?
Well, out of curiosity, because, I've been interested in the Bilderberg group now for some years. First of all, there was no admission that they actually existed. And then slowly, because of the internet, people have become aware of it, and now they themselves, have to have a website and a PR response to the fact that everybody knows that the most important, powerful, richest people in the world meet once a year, and the press hasn't been interested in it for 59 years, and now they are, so that's great. So now perhaps we can start to understand what it is they talk about and what's the significance of it all.
Mr. Barroso is supposed to be here today. I remember that in 2011 you made a question to the Commission to answer about the attendance in St. Moritz. Can you tell us about...
I think I got a very kind of, catch-all answer that yes, they come, there's nothing to worry about, and I can't remember quite now what they said about who paid for it. I think it was done out of official funds. But of course, what's more important to me is I actually wrote to George Osborne when he went to the one, I think it was in 2011, didn't get a reply at all. I asked him, on what basis he came, or who paid for it. I did a similar thing to Peter Mandelson, I never got a reply. The only person who's had the courtesy to respond was Kenneth Clark, who said that there's nothing to worry about, it's just a lot of nice people discussing the future of the world over a cup of tea. And it's all very nice. Well, I find it very difficult to believe that the most powerful people in the world, given the demands on their time, would actually give up 2 or 3 days of their time to talk about things that weren't important and didn't have an outcome. Would they really do that? Especially some of these people pop up year after year. I mean, interestingly, Ed Balls, I find, who's going to be here today according to the guest list, has also been to several of these conferences now. And George Osborne's here. Now, if George Osborne and Ed Balls had a cup of tea in the House of Commons tea room and had a natter and were observed doing it, it would be front page news. What on earth are they talking about, And it would be a big story in the press. But they turn up with 130 other people, and it's not news. It's incredible, isn't it? Although it is news now, because it was in the London Evening Standard yesterday. I believe the Daily Mail has written something about it. So they have to have some kind of managed PR response now, and it'd be interesting to see how that develops.
And you're a European Member of Parliament. What is the impression of your colleagues inside the Parliament? Are there a lot that are interested in the
No, I think there's been 1 or 2 who've actually voiced this in the past. I've made a couple of little speeches on it, really just drawing attention to it and asking what it's all about. But I don't think the mainstream political parties, I don't want to do anyone a disservice, but I don't believe that Conservative Labour or Lib Dems have said anything about this over the years. And I find it incredible because, I actually believe in democracy. I think that we ought to know what the people who govern our world, which is very, very influential when it comes to banks and businesses, what they're actually talking about and what decisions they make. And I think that we live in a world where, especially in this country, and I suppose in the rest of the world, Western world as well, where many of the decisions that government make are deeply unpopular with their own people. And we're constantly scratching our heads and wondering why governments do these things, which nobody seems to want. And also the opposition parties are also in agreement with many of these things. So that's why my party's done so well, because we're out of the mainstream and we're actually, whether you agree with us or not, we're saying things that a lot of people want and think. And it's why we're surging ahead in the polls and in the elections. But why is it that we get all of these policies that nobody wants? And I as a politician think, well, why doesn't the Labour Party or the Conservative Party actually say, well, the EU's a mess, let's get out of it, we have to control mass immigration, why are we giving all this money to the banks when they're ruining the economy, should we have another strategy to deal with the economic crisis? I'm asking those questions, I'm interested in those questions, and I think British people of Western Europe want to know, America want to know why these things are not being done, which they would vote for, given the choice. And I think perhaps this kind of meeting has something to do with that, because decisions are being reached elsewhere that are being imposed upon people. And I think one of the reasons for the success of parties like mine is because people now think that politics is something that's done to them and not something that's done for them.
Can you, in few words, describe for our viewers what is your definition of Bilderberg?
Well, I think that, of course, it's a group of the most powerful, richest people in the world who meet together for talks about, a very bland agenda that wouldn't be out of place on a school debating society. What do they actually say? We don't know. What decisions do they reach? We don't know. And the biggest problem is the fact that the media have conspired not to report on this for the last 59 years. And this is the first time that I know of that there's going to be any serious media coverage. Will it be serious media coverage? We'll have to wait and see.
Just a last question. If you had the opportunity to address the Bilderberg, what would you tell them?
What would I tell them? I think I'd say, what is it that you think you can achieve in secrecy that you couldn't achieve in the open? Because if you have the interests of the people at heart around the world, even if you need to have discussions under, Chatham House rules, at the end of those discussions, don't you think you would achieve far more by telling people what it is, or the conclusions that you've actually come to, and the recommendations that you would make on how to fix the world's problems? Because if you want to fix the world's problems, you have to get the people with you. You can't do it if they're not with you or they're against you.
And you're talking about Chatham House rule. Is there a link between Bilderberg and Chatham House?
Well, I mean, they are rules which say basically, and I've got some sympathy with this point of view. If you want to get people in politics or business in a discussion, they have to be able to talk freely, to say what they really think is wrong, what they really think the situation, and discuss things, in an open way, but are not going to be misrepresented later on, which is what the press love to do, to focus on something that somebody said out of context. And so that's different. That's a discussion where you can say what you want, and without fear of it coming back and being used against you in an out-of-context way. But as I say, that's one thing for discussions, but if you're actually reaching decisions, which they say they don't, and that you then make or even recommendations about what public policy should be, I think people need to know what the basis of those recommendations are. And of course, they say they don't reach any decisions, but why are these people going to meet for 3 days? George Osborne, Chancellor of the Exchequer, been here several times, probably about one of the most busiest men in the country, I should think. He's got time to give up 2 or 3 days if it doesn't mean anything. Sorry, I don't buy that.
Mr. Button, thank you very much.
Thank you.
One question, please. Who owns the Bank of England, and why can't we print our own money?
Well, you see now, the Bank of England is owned by a nominees company, isn't it? And we don't know who the shareholders of that company are. And I did actually write to the Bank of England, I think, some time ago, and asked them, first of all, who they were, and they wouldn't tell me. And then I wrote to the European Commission and said, is it breaking the EU's rules on, not that I care less about the EU's rules, but their laws are their laws. Does the Bank of England actually break these rules by not disclosing the name of the shareholders? And they said, no, it doesn't. So that's all. So we still don't know.
Yeah. But why can't we print our own money? Why do we have to borrow it off of private banks?
That's a whole bigger question, which I don't claim to have the expertise to talk about, but I know that there's a whole movement there about who's allowed to generate money and print money.
Yeah.
And I think it was Kenneth Galbraith who said when the Dutch started doing this in the 17th century, it was the biggest con ever perpetrated on the public, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, because I've just been led to believe it's the Bank of England was took over during the Napoleonic Wars by the Rothschilds.
Well,
that?
The Bank of England was actually nationalised, wasn't it, after the Second World War? Then a few years later it was then put back into private ownership, but we don't know who the shareholders are.
Okay, thank you very much.